Hi, everyone. Bonjour, kwe, unasakut. Welcome to our recap and briefing. I hope you guys have been exploring all the great content, stories, videos, and important information on the bridge this week, which is helping to celebrate National Indigenous Peoples Day and National Indigenous History Month. And it's my true pleasure to welcome our special guest and good friend, Val Courtois, to our recap and briefing. Welcome to the bridge and recap and briefing, Val.
Thanks, Jeff. It's a pleasure and honor to be here.
And this is not the first time you've been, well, it's first time on our virtual bridge, but not your first time on an SOI bridge, because you've joined the C3 and Students on Ice expeditions in the past. And you were going to join us this summer, of course, but we had to postpone till next summer. So thank you for joining us. It's great to have you. Val, you're a pretty amazing person. You're a registered professional forester who specializes in Indigenous issues, forest ecology, and ecosystem-based management and planning. You've advised groups across the country and around the world on forestry and conservation issues and projects, including a lot of work helping to protect the incredible boreal forest in Canada. You're a member of the Innu community of Mashteuiatsh. How did I do?
Pretty good.
Located on the shore of beautiful Lac-St-Jean, Quebec, home to the great Lac-St-Jean tourtière. Yum. Since 2013, Val, you've been the director of the Indigenous Leadership Institute. And in that role, Val's been really helping to lead this very exciting Land Needs Guardians movement. And Val, you're joining us today from Goose Bay, Labrador. So there's so much to talk about, but I thought we'd really focus in on the Land Needs Guardians program. Could you tell us a little bit more about Land Needs Guardians? And also, I mean, you speak a lot about how Guardians is an expression of nationhood and cultural responsibility. So if you could also tell us a bit more about what you mean by that.
Sure. Well, thanks. The Land Needs Guardians is a brand new campaign that we launched just in the end of January. And essentially, it's meant to be the face of what we're calling a movement right across what is now known as Canada. And that is for nations to have their own guardians, their own teams, their own boots on the ground, or moccasins and mucklucks, as I like to say, on the ground, and to be able to better manage our landscapes. And really, that is an expression of nationhood. Any nation is first and foremost based on a land base and a relationship and a responsibility to that land base. And the guardians are essentially a face of that relationship. And so we've gone in this country from having about 30 programs 2 years ago to now having over 60 programs. Wow. And every week we get requests from different nations saying, how do I jump in? What does this mean to me? And how can we be a part of this large movement? And in terms of what Guardians do and what cultural responsibility looks like on a day-to-day basis, it could be managing visitor experiences in different national parks. We can think about Guayhanas or the newest national park in Taidonanene, or the Torngat National Park here in Labrador. Mealy Mountains National Park as well in Labrador. It has some guardians working there to help and co-manage forestry. Here the guardians co-wrote the forest management plan for an area of 70,000 square kilometers, which is one of the biggest forest districts in the country. And to helping on a mine site. Voisey's Bay is the largest nickel mine in the world here. And I know as Students on Ice, I was actually hoping that we would be able this year to kind of skirt and just get a sense of that project and the implications. But at all times, there are guardians on site making sure that that mine is doing exactly what it said it would do in terms of protecting the land and ensuring that the activities in the mine do not adversely affect the Innu ability to essentially be Innu in that area.
Amazing. And that was pretty exciting news that came out last week about the Taidene Nene award, the big
Yeah.
equator award that they got for the decades of work making that incredible protected area happen.
Yeah, first time in Canada that award was awarded, and you know, I think they had 300 other projects they were competing against, and so it's a real
Wow.
mark of the leadership that we've seen from the elders and from the negotiators and from the chief and council in Lutzelke.
Well, so it's such an example of growing support and recognition of why this movement is so important. Val, how can supporting guardians contribute to reconciliation? What's the link there?
Yeah. So, you know, guardians are often on the land. They're meeting other land users. They're talking to development proponents. They're talking to visitors. That means there's an interface and there's an ability to have a conversation right out there. And often, too often, there are these weird barriers between non-Indigenous and Indigenous communities. I've heard a lot of my non-Indigenous friends say, you know, I'm afraid to go to the res. It's, I want to know more, but am I welcomed? There's a lot of those kind of social, cultural barriers that just seem to stop or reduce the opportunities for reconciliation. But to me, reconciliation means one-on-one conversations. It's me getting to know you and you getting to know me on on a values perspective, on what we care about. And once those exchanges start to happen, then those other barriers seem to melt away. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really important for Canadians to see that guardians are not just good for our nations, but they're good for this country.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And in that way, it makes so much sense. Like nature sort of provides this connection, this bridge, as it were.
Right.
And that's in a way what brought you and me together even years ago. It was that shared passion for conservation and nature and forests. And here we are today. So we've done a whole lot of great things together. Why are you personally so passionate about Indigenous-led conservation and stewardship?
You know, I'm personally really passionate about it for a number of reasons. One is, of course, I have a natural affinity to wanting to as an Innu woman. For me, that means understanding the dynamics of caribou and understanding how we work on evolving our culture too within those kind of landscapes. And to me, it is really important for Indigenous peoples who have innate cultural responsibilities in their own nationhood. For as an Innu person, the first thing you learn as a kid when you're going berry picking is you don't pick all of them. You know, the first thing you observe when you're observing hunting is the care that the hunter has with the animal, and the respect, and saying thank you, and all of those things are important values, I think, for everybody to get. And the reality is, with the boreal forest that we have here in this country, I mean, all forests, but it's the largest intact forest in the world, and we have a real responsibility as the people who live in that forest to make sure that it's as healthy as possible. It is truly the lungs of the planet, of course, other than the oceans, which we have this lovely, you have this lovely two breaths video that I think speaks to the value of the oceans very well. That was done by the alumni last year. But so I think it's really important that Indigenous-led conservation and stewardship be recognized for the opportunity that it offers. And Canada has had some leadership internationally in expressing its desire to lead on conservation, on biodiversity conservation, and on nature-based solutions to climate change. And the only way that Canada is going to achieve those targets, be it 25% by 25, which we heard the Prime Minister pledge in the last speech to the throne, as well as perhaps 30 by 30, which is where we're hearing globally things are trending. The best opportunities to do that is through Indigenous-led conservation. And I've been in this career for about 20 years now, and in my time, I've seen that the vast majority of protected areas that have been established and are well managed and are seen as leading examples of conservation have either been led or co-led by Indigenous peoples in Canada. And so that's a trend that I think needs to continue.
100%, Val, totally. And we wouldn't have reached our 20% by 2020 goal if it wasn't for Indigenous-led conservation efforts like Talarutupi which we've spoken about so much recently. And there's a great video on the bridge to learn more about that. And going forward, this Indigenous-led conservation is by far the most effective way, probably the only way in partnership with other efforts to achieve whatever the new goals are going to be. Let's hope it's 30 by 30. Who knows, it 50 by 30.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Jeff, because on average, when Indigenous peoples are holding the pen in land use planning, which kind of allows you to determine where conservation happens and where development or other activities should and could be permitted and how that happens, there's an average of 60% protection by Indigenous peoples. Wow. And so we, we tend to not look at targets as Indigenous peoples. We don't tend to look at the target as a way of planning too. We tend to sit and say, well, what does the forest, what does the land, what does the water need to be healthy? And then what's left over, how can we do that? How can we use that and do different things there in a respectful way? So it's a different approach, and it leads to significant conservation gains.
Yeah, and so much to learn from that Indigenous knowledge. As we saw in C3, from the time we left Newfoundland to the time we got to Vancouver Island, we were exclusively an Indigenous community. And across the country, giving responsibility to the people who live in these places and have been stewards for hundreds and hundreds of years just makes sense. And I love the sort of motto that you have, which is to take care of the land, and the land takes care of us. That pretty much says it all.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, and then we're going to run out of time soon, Val, but what can Indigenous youth across Canada, what would you suggest to them? How can they get involved? What can they do?
Well, the best way to get involved is to talk to your community leaders, your elders, about your vision for what your role is in the landscape and how you see your future. I know that it's not easy to be a young person in many of our communities. We're faced with a number of challenges that sometimes make life really hard, but there is healing power in the land. Just being out there, I've experienced it myself. And so talk to people around you about that desire, and reach out to the Land Needs Guardians Network. We're on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Check us out. There's a number of video products, a number of really neat testimonials that speak to why it is important to do that work. And it's something that will allow you to be who you are, which isn't always easy to do in other careers. We've heard all these stories about the guy who drives the truck and feels bad about what he's doing to the land, and this is another way of being out there. And so I think reach out, talk to your leadership, talk to other youth around you, and stay tuned. We're hoping to do some good stuff to help with bridging youth with the Guardians initiatives.
Awesome. And I think we should let people know they should go to landneedsguardians.ca, and you can sign up and support the movement, which I love that. Love that T-shirt. Maybe you can get one of those on your website. I'm not sure, but landneedsguardians.ca. Check it out. and Val, I know, is always generous with her time. If any youth out there listening, students and ICE alumni or other, wanted to touch base with Val, I'm sure she'd
Absolutely.
love that.
Yeah.
And you know, it's, you and I have talked about this too. Students and ICE is about to launch a new program called Blue Futures Pathways, which is about connecting youth across the country, particularly Indigenous youth, to the opportunities in this thing called the sustainable blue economy, which is linked, of course, to the green economy. And Land Needs Guardians is a huge part of that. So it's we need more bright, young, smart, passionate minds going in these directions.
That's right.
Val, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. On n'a pas parlé en français, mais je sais que vous êtes francophone aussi. Alors, s'il y a des gens de Québec qui veulent vous contacter, ils peuvent parler en français aussi.
Ah, absolument, s'il vous plaît, tendez la main, parlez-nous. J'aimerais bien voir plus d'Autochtones francophones impliqués dans nos programmes et ça me ferait plaisir d'en discuter avec vous.
And just a little heads up about our next recap and briefing. The next bridge is going to be focusing a lot on Antarctica, another place where Students on ICE has spent a lot of time. And we're really looking forward to sharing that with you. But thanks for joining us, everybody, here in our recap and briefing. And we're going to wrap it up. And another big thank you, merci, to Val, and the incredible work that you're doing for Indigenous communities and peoples and for Canada.
Thanks, Jeff, and I look forward to tuning in to the next bridge segments. It's been nice to be able to connect in this way. I have to say, I miss you guys, and I love that you're doing this virtually.
Thanks, Val. We miss you too, and well, next summer we'll be back together out there somewhere. Okay, take care. Bye, everybody. Thank you.